The drums of Uganda's heartland echo with stories of pain and pride, their rhythms reverberating through time. Amid the verdant hills and endless skies, a man rose from obscurity to reshape the destiny of a nation, his name whispered with awe, dread, and disbelief. To understand Idi Amin is to journey into the labyrinth of power, pride, and paranoia, a tale as complex as the man himself. Amin's life began humbly in Koboko, Uganda, around 1925. The son of a peasant family, Amin grew up in the cultural melting pot of his Kakwa tribe. His early years were shaped by British colonial rule, a system that imposed order through hierarchy and violence. Amin's physical prowess and charisma led him to enlist in the King's African Rifles, the colonial army. Here, he found his path to power, excelling as a soldier and earning the admiration of his peers. By the 1950s, he was known for his bravery and skill, traits that masked a darker undercurrent of ruthlessness. But the man who would one day seize the reins of Uganda was not merely a product of colonial training. Beneath his imposing frame and booming laughter lay a psyche deeply scarred by his environment and experiences. Amin's rise to power coincided with the twilight of British rule in East Africa, a period marked by instability and the erosion of traditional structures. In 1971, Amin seized power through a coup, ousting Milton Obote. To many Ugandans, Amin initially seemed like a savior. He promised to restore dignity and order to a country fractured by corruption and ethnic tensions. Yet the seeds of Amin's tyranny were already sown. His psychological profile, shaped by years of military service and a life lived under colonial domination, revealed a man driven by insecurity, pride, and an insatiable need for validation. He was deeply charismatic, capable of winning the loyalty of his inner circle and the adoration of the masses. But this charisma masked a volatile temper and a capacity for cruelty that would define his rule. The early years of Amin's presidency were marked by grand gestures. He expelled tens of thousands of Asians from Uganda, claiming it was a move to return the country's wealth to its indigenous people. Amin's decision, though framed as patriotic, was deeply personal, an assertion of power and a rejection of the colonial system that had marginalized him and his people. As Amin's power grew, so did his paranoia. He surrounded himself with a network of loyalists, many from his own Kakwa tribe, while systematically purging perceived enemies. The line between real threats and imagined conspiracies blurred, leading to a reign of terror. To understand Amin's brutality, one must look beyond the surface. His actions were not merely those of a madman, but of a leader desperate to maintain control in a fractious environment. Amin's psyche bore the weight of deep-seated insecurities about his intelligence, his legitimacy, and his place in history. His grandiose proclamations and self-bestowed titles, such as His Excellency, President for Life, Lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the seas, were more than ego trips. They were attempts to fill the void of self-doubt and to project an unassailable image to his enemies. Amin's personal life mirrored the chaos of his regime. Married multiple times and a father to numerous children, his relationships were marked by both tenderness and violence. This duality, affection and brutality, was emblematic of his rule. The international community viewed Amin with a mix of fascination and revulsion. To some, he was a symbol of post-colonial empowerment, a leader who defied the West with audacity and flair. His flamboyant personality, his bizarre antics, such as declaring himself King of Scotland and offering to mediate the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, made him a media sensation, even as his people suffered under his rule. By the late 1970s, Amin's grip on power began to weaken. His invasion of Tanzania, a move driven by hubris and a desire to assert dominance, backfired spectacularly. Tanzanian forces, alongside Ugandan exiles, launched a counteroffensive that ousted Amin in 1979. Forced into exile, Amin fled first to Libya, then to Saudi Arabia, where he lived out his remaining years in relative obscurity. In exile, Amin remained unapologetic. He saw himself not as a tyrant, but as a misunderstood leader who had been betrayed by his allies and maligned by history. His self-perception, rooted in delusion and denial, was a defense mechanism against the weight of his actions. For a man who had built his identity on strength and control, to acknowledge his failures would have been unthinkable. Idi Amin died in 2003, far from the land he once ruled with an iron fist. His legacy is a scar on Uganda's history, a reminder of the perils of unchecked power and the complexities of human ambition. Yet, to reduce Amin to a mere monster is to miss the nuances of his life. He was a product of his time, shaped by colonialism, tribalism, and the brutal calculus of survival in a volatile world. Amin's story is a cautionary tale of how power can amplify the darkest corners of the human psyche. It is a reminder that leaders are not born in a vacuum, but are forged by the forces of history, culture, and personal experience. In Amin, we see the interplay of charisma and cruelty, of insecurity and ambition, of humanity and its shadow. As the drums of Uganda's heartland continue to echo, they carry with them the memory of a man who sought to reshape his world but left behind a legacy of pain. To confront the story of Idi Amin is to confront the complexities of power, the fragility of the human mind, and the enduring quest for understanding in the face of darkness.